I was 13. My sister, Vanessa, was 18 and convinced she ran every room. That Saturday, she drove us in Mom's dented sedan from Dayton to the Amtrak station in Cincinnati, saying we needed fresh air and a quick ride by the river. I believed her because I still believed people who sounded sure. The station was all hard floors and echoes. I wore a blue hoodie and carried a small backpack with a paperback, earbuds, a granola bar, and $8. Vanessa held her phone like a mirror, checking her eyeliner. "Stay here," she said, pointing at a metal bench near the platform doors. "I'll grab drinks. You like hot chocolate, right?" "Okay," I said and sat. She took a few steps, turned, and added, "Let's see how you do finding your own way if I get lost. You're always bragging you're independent." She laughed at her own line. "It's fine," I said. "I'm not a baby." She disappeared into the concourse. 10 minutes slid into 20. No hot chocolate. I texted, "Where are you?" No bubbles. I called. It rang once, then voicemail. I called again. Straight to voicemail. I told myself her battery died or she got stuck in line. I am very good at giving people unearned benefit of the doubt. A woman in a red coat sat 2 seats down and gave me a polite smile. I smiled back like I had a plan. I unwrapped my granola bar and broke it in half, as if neatness could fix any of this. 30 minutes became an hour. My phone buzzed. A text from Vanessa. "You're tough. Find your way home." Think of it as practice. No emoji, no directions. I typed fast. "Not funny. Where are you? I'll meet you by the newsstand." I hit send and stared. Nothing. I called again and listened to her cheerful recording until I wanted to throw the phone. Inside, the ticket clerk's name tag read Ron. "Can I use a phone?" I asked. He slid a landline across the counter. I dialed Vanessa. Voicemail. I dialed Mom. Mailbox full. Ron asked, "You need someone to pick you up?" "I'm okay," I said. It felt like a guess. Back on the bench, I counted what I had. $8.47, half a granola bar, a library receipt, and a plastic hair tie. None of it looked like a plan. I watched quick scenes. A dad tying a sneaker, a grandma hug, a couple arguing in whispers. I wasn't invisible. I was background. The lights clicked brighter as the sky went blue. I pulled my hoodie strings tight, then looser. I texted Vanessa. "I'm still here. Please come back." I hated typing please. Nothing came back. I thought about calling the police, then pictured the ride home and the fight waiting there. I went back to Ron. "Is there a place I can wait inside after the platforms close?" He pointed to a row of chairs by a big window. "Warmer there. You'll be fine." I moved to the chairs. The glass was cold through my sleeve. Outside, a freight train crawled by. I set a 30-minute alarm and told myself that when it went off, Vanessa would be back and this would be a dumb story we laughed about later. The alarm went off. Nothing changed. I tried Mom again. Full mailbox. I did not try my father. No number. I started stacking facts so I didn't have to feel them. Vanessa joked about me finding my way. She told me to think of this as practice. She has not come back. No one is coming except trains. I walked the concourse once. I passed the newsstand, the coffee kiosk, a poster about missing kids that made my chest tight. A security guard nodded and kept moving. At a vending machine, I bought a bottle of water. The machine ate $1, then dropped water. Back on the chair, I tried to read. The same paragraph kept happening. The janitor glanced at me. "You okay, kid?" "I'm fine," I said too fast. "Someone picking you up?" "Yeah. Any minute." I lied. He nodded and moved on. Cold seeped in around 10. I tucked my hands into my sleeves and pulled my knees up. I wasn't crying. I considered it the way you consider medicine you don't like. Battery hit 20. I dimmed the screen. One last text. "I'm by the window. Please come back." I put the phone face down so I wouldn't have to watch a quiet screen. Across the room, someone laughed. The clock over the concourse ticked loud enough to hear. I counted trains instead of minutes. Passenger. Freight. Nothing. The bench left a line in the back of my legs. I adjusted the strap on my shoulder because adjusting is what you do when you can't fix the big thing. Vanessa's last text stayed the last text. I gave myself rules. Stay where there are people. Don't follow anyone. Split your money. Use the bathroom near others. Ask for help only when you have to. I wasn't scared. I was alert. That's a different kind of energy. I shifted forward so my feet could touch the floor, slid the backpack under my calves, and wrapped my hands around the straps. I watched the walkway, the platform clock, and the place where Vanessa had turned away. Because at 13, I still thought if you stood in the right spot long enough, people would keep their word. An announcement rolled over the speakers about a late arrival from Chicago. A couple hurried past with backpacks. A security sweep paused and moved on. I took 2 sips of water and saved the rest. I slid my hoodie sleeves over my hands and counted to 60, then did it again. I kept my eyes on the doors and waited the way kids wait when they trust instructions. My stomach growled louder than the trains outside, and I realized the granola bar had worn off hours ago. I shifted on the bench, hugging my backpack like it was some kind of shield. People kept coming and going, couples holding hands, families herding kids, travelers dragging rolling suitcases. Everyone had somewhere to be. I didn't. I just had this bench and the hard floor under it. The vending machine glowed down the hall, taunting me with pictures of chips and candy bars. I dug into my hoodie pocket and pulled out what I had left, $7 and a few coins. Not much. I walked to the machine and pressed the button for a pack of crackers. The bag dropped with a clunk that sounded louder than it should. I tore it open and ate slow, 1 cracker at a time, stretching it like it was a meal. When I sat back down, I texted Vanessa again. I'm still here. Please come get me. The screen stayed empty. I wanted to smash the phone on the floor, but it was the only connection I had, even if nobody on the other end cared. I set it face down again and leaned back, trying to rest my eyes. The announcements about delayed trains kept cutting through, sharp and loud, every few minutes. At some point, I stretched out on the bench with my backpack under my head. The plastic was cold against my cheek, but I didn't care. My eyes burned, but sleep didn't come easy. I drifted in and out, startled awake every time someone walked by or a train screeched against the tracks. I kept imagining I'd see Vanessa's sneakers in the crowd or hear her laugh. Nothing. Only strangers. None of them looking at me twice. By morning, I felt heavier than when I went to sleep. My hoodie wasn't enough against the chill. I used the bathroom sink to splash water on my face, but the mirror only showed a kid with swollen eyes and dirty hair. I looked older than 13, like I'd lived a year in a single night. I pulled the hood up tighter and walked outside to the front of the station. The air was sharper out there, people hurrying past with coffee cups and briefcases. The world kept moving like my absence didn't matter. I sat on the curb and tried to think. Going home meant facing Vanessa, maybe Mom if she was sober enough to notice me. Going home meant being the punchline again. The word practice from her text kept replaying in my head. Practice for what? Being abandoned? Practice for nobody giving a damn? The thought sat in my chest like a stone. A couple of hours later, the hunger came back, stronger. I used $2 at a corner store nearby for a bottle of water and a packet of crackers. The cashier gave me a long look, like he wanted to ask where my parents were, but he didn't. He just took my money. I sat on the curb outside and ate slow again, watching cars fly down the street. Every one of them looked like it was going somewhere more important than where I was. By evening, I had no idea where to go. The sun started sinking, throwing long shadows across the pavement. The city felt louder now, sharper. I kept walking, block after block, until the lights from a 24-hour diner caught my eye. People inside laughed over plates of pancakes and mugs of coffee. I didn't dare sit down, but I slipped into the bathroom when no one was looking. The fluorescent light flickered above the mirror, and I locked myself in a stall, sliding the bolt fast. The toilet seat was my bed for the night. I hugged my backpack against my chest and tried to make myself small. Every creak of the door made my heart jump. I couldn't sleep, but I kept my eyes closed, listening to the hum of the light and the muffled voices outside. When morning finally came, my back hurt like I'd been folded in half. I washed up at the sink, using paper towels to wipe under my arms, trying to look less like what I was lost. I stepped outside again. The diner smell clung to me, eggs and grease. I sat on the curb, my head heavy, my lips dry. That's when I noticed a woman stop in front of me. She had kind eyes, a purple scarf, and gray hair pulled back neat. She looked down and asked, "You okay, honey?" I froze. My first instinct was to lie, to say yes. But the word caught in my throat. My voice cracked instead. I lost my family. The words tumbled out like they'd been waiting. She didn't flinch, didn't walk away like I half expected. She just sat down beside me on the curb like she wasn't afraid of catching something from me. "What's your name?" she asked. "Emma," I said quickly. I didn't want to be Abby anymore. Abby was the kid Vanessa ditched. Emma was safer, even if it wasn't real. She nodded gently. "I'm Marjorie." She reached into her tote bag and pulled out a wrapped sandwich. "Here. You need food more than I do." My hands shook when I took it. I muttered a thank you and unwrapped it, the smell alone making my mouth water. I hadn't eaten anything real in days. She didn't press for details, just sat there while I ate. "You don't have to tell me what happened," she said softly. "But I know a place where kids like you can sleep. They'll feed you. It's safe." "Is it the police?" I asked quickly, panic rising. "No," she said. "A church shelter. Volunteers. They don't ask many questions." She reached into her purse and pressed a crumpled $20 bill into my hand. "There's a bus to Millport. Ask the driver to drop you at Maple Avenue. The church shelter's there." I stared at the bill like it was too heavy for my hand. "Why are you helping me?" She smiled faintly. "Because once someone helped me when I was young and scared. You'll understand one day." Before I could answer, she gave my shoulder a squeeze, stood up, and walked away into the crowd. The $20 bill bought me a bus ticket, a hot chocolate from a vending machine, and the tiniest bit of hope. I sat by the window on the bus, clutching my backpack, the scarfed woman already fading into the mix of faces I'd seen and forgotten. I whispered to myself so low I could barely hear it. "You're not going back." The bus pulled out, and I watched the city blur past, the train station disappearing behind me. My hands tightened around the straps of my backpack as if letting go would send me back there. The bus rumbled over uneven pavement, every bump jolting through the metal seat. I held the $20 bill change tight in my palm even though it was sweaty and crumpled. The driver glanced at me once in the mirror but didn't ask anything. Good. I didn't want questions. I just wanted distance, enough miles between me and that station, to make sure Vanessa couldn't decide I was still her problem. Millport wasn't much rows of brick storefronts. A pawn shop, a faded grocery, and a diner that looked like it had been there since the 60s. The bus hissed to a stop at Maple Avenue, exactly where Marjorie had said. I stepped off and pulled my hoodie strings tighter, clutching the backpack straps so no one could see how bad my hands shook. Across the street, a brick church sat with its doors open and a hand-painted sign that read, "Evening meals at 6, beds available." I walked in slow, my sneakers squeaking against the floor. The air smelled like soup and bleach. A woman at the front desk gave me a quick look over. "Name?" she asked. "Emma," I said without hesitating. The lie came easier the second time. She scribbled on a clipboard. "All right, Emma, we'll get you a plate and a bunk. Girls' dorm is through the hall." No one asked where my parents were or why I was alone, just like Marjorie promised. Dinner was watery chicken soup with crackers, but it was hot, and it filled my stomach. The girls' dorm had rows of metal bunks, thin mattresses, and a smell like damp laundry. Still, when I lay down with my backpack under my head, it was the first real bed I'd had since that station. I closed my eyes and told myself, Abby was gone, Emma was staying. Over the next week, I learned the shelter's rhythm. Breakfast at 7, chores by 9, school enrollment if you could manage it. I kept to myself, spoke only when someone asked, and always used Emma. The name stuck so well, I almost forgot the other one. Almost. One night, I saw Marjorie again. She came into the shelter with a stack of donated blankets. When she spotted me, she smiled like she'd been expecting me. "How are you holding up, Emma?" "Fine," I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. She sat across from me at the table. "You remind me of myself at your age. Stronger than you think. Don't waste that. End of 2. I nodded, not sure what to say. People didn't usually tell me I was strong. They told me I was a burden, a mistake, or invisible. But strong? That was new. The shelter helped me register at the local middle school. I didn't have records, but they pushed me through with temporary placement. On my first day, I wrote Emma Miles at the top of the form without hesitation. Miles came from a road sign I saw on the bus ride. It felt ordinary and American enough to pass. No one questioned it. Teachers called me Emma. Students called me Emma. I answered every time. Still, nights were the hardest. The other girls whispered about their families, foster parents, or caseworkers. I never joined in. I stared at the ceiling, repeating the same thought. No one was coming back. That was a relief and a wound at the same time. By the end of the year, social services placed me with a foster family, the Lanes. They lived in a small 2-story house with a front porch that sagged on one side. They weren't saints. They did it for the stipend, but they weren't cruel either. Dinner was on the table every night. The rules were clear. Keep grades up, respect curfew, no cops at the door. For me, that was enough. At school, I kept my head down. I figured if I didn't make noise, no one would notice the holes in my story. Still, teachers noticed I followed instructions, did homework on time, and never caused trouble. That got me placed in JROTC Junior Reserve Officers Training Corps. At first, I thought it was just another way for adults to boss kids around, but something about the uniform hit different. For the first time, everyone looked the same. Same shirts, same pants, same shoes. My past didn't matter as much. The instructor, Sergeant Daniels, had the kind of voice that made you straighten your spine without thinking. He barked at us about respect, discipline, and teamwork. Strangely enough, I liked it. Orders were clear. Consequences were predictable. Unlike home, nothing depended on someone's mood. "Good work, Miles," he said one day after I nailed a drill sequence. The sound of it, Miles, echoed in my chest. He didn't know it wasn't real, but maybe that didn't matter. Maybe it was real now. Outside of school, I stayed sharp. I carried everything I owned in that backpack, even though the foster home had drawers for me. I didn't trust permanence. But inside the JROTC classroom, I let myself imagine it. Imagine being more than the girl left at a station. Imagine being someone who got to choose her life. The first time we did a community service project, cleaning up trash at a local park, I worked twice as fast as the others. When Sergeant Daniels asked why, I shrugged. I don't like leaving a mess behind. He gave me a look that said he heard more than I meant. As the year went on, I stopped flinching when people called me Emma. I raised my hand in class sometimes. I laughed when one of the cadets made a dumb joke. It wasn't much, but it was something. At night, I still lay awake sometimes, staring at the ceiling of the foster home bedroom. I'd press my palms flat against the blanket and remind myself, Emma Miles is not waiting at that station anymore. She's here, now, building something no one can take away. One weekend, Marjorie came by to check in. She sat on the porch with me, sipping sweet tea the foster mom handed her. "You've grown into that name," she said. "Which one?" I asked carefully. She smiled. "The one you chose." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. For the first time, I felt like the name wasn't just a cover. It was a beginning. That night, I laid out my JROTC uniform for Monday, crisp and ready. The creases were sharp, the shoes shined enough to see my reflection. I looked at that reflection and thought, maybe I could do more than survive. Maybe I could serve. Maybe I could matter in a way Vanessa never thought I would. I turned off the light with that thought still burning steady in my chest. The first time I stood in line for morning inspection, the weight of the uniform felt heavier than the fabric itself. The starched collar scratched at my neck, the stiff pants itched, but I didn't complain. The other cadets shifted nervously, fixing belts or smoothing shirts. I kept my arms at my sides and my chin up, just like Sergeant Daniels drilled into us. When he walked past me, he stopped, adjusted the edge of my sleeve, and muttered, "Good attention to detail, Miles." That was all he said, but it stuck. The foster home I lived in then wasn't much. The Lanes did the basics. 3 meals, clean clothes, and a curfew that actually mattered. They weren't warm, but they weren't cruel, and that counted as a win in my book. I knew the system could be worse. I'd heard the horror stories in the cafeteria. For me, as long as no one raised a hand or locked the fridge, I could make it work. School days blended into a rhythm. Wake up at 6, bus ride across town, math, history, English, then JROTC. I didn't have close friends. I wasn't built for sleepovers or mall trips. But I had a squad, and that was different. Information, no one cared if your parents showed up for conferences or if your address kept changing. All that mattered was whether you could march in step and keep your uniform tight. I learned fast that the military routine worked like armor. The sharper I looked, the less people asked questions. The better I performed, the fewer eyes lingered on the gaps in my story. And I wanted to disappear those gaps so badly, I polished my shoes until the black leather caught the fluorescent lights like glass. One afternoon, Daniels pulled me aside after drill. "You ever thought about the service?" he asked. "The service?" I repeated. "Army, Marines, Navy, take your pick. Kids like you do well when they've already learned discipline. You got that." I didn't answer right away. No one had ever told me I had anything worth keeping, let alone discipline. "I'm only 14, I said. "Yeah, well, 14 becomes 18 faster than you think. Keep your grades up. Keep showing up. You'll have options." Options. That word felt like oxygen. For most of my life, choices belonged to other people. Vanessa chose when to ditch me. Mom chose not to answer her phone. Foster parents chose whether I stayed or got moved. But if I stayed on this path, maybe I could choose something for myself. Still, it wasn't all steady progress. Some nights the walls of the foster home felt too close. Other kids in the system drifted in and out, some loud, some broken in ways you could see, some broken in ways you couldn't. I kept to myself, always sleeping with my backpack next to the bed. I didn't trust drawers. I didn't trust permanence. At school, one of the cadets, a boy named Tyler, tried to ask me about my family once. "So, Miles, you got brothers or sisters?" he said during lunch. "No," I answered flatly. Then I added, "Just me." He looked like he wanted to press, but I shut it down with a stare. After that, nobody asked again. My walls stayed up, and that suited me fine. Competitions became my outlet. Drill team, color guard, even small community parades, I signed up for everything. The first time I carried the flag in front of a crowd, I felt taller than I was. People clapped, strangers nodded, and for once I wasn't invisible. I wasn't the kid left behind at a station. I was Cadet Miles, straight-backed and steady, representing something bigger than myself. The structure bled into the rest of my life. I started making my bed with hospital corners, folding my laundry into sharp squares, timing myself on chores just to shave off seconds. The other foster kids rolled their eyes, but I didn't care. Order made sense. Rules made sense. They gave me a way to push back against the chaos I came from. When I turned 15, Daniels handed me a brochure for the Marine Corps. "Hardest branch," he said. "Not for everyone, but for some kids it's the making of them." I stuffed the paper in my backpack and read it that night under the blanket with a flashlight. The images of recruits crawling through mud, climbing ropes, standing in formation under the sun, it all looked impossible and perfect at the same time. I wanted that grit. I wanted that transformation. I wanted to be unrecognizable from the girl who once sat hungry at a train station. Still, I had 3 years before I could even think about it. In the meantime, I doubled down on JROTC. Daniels noticed. "Miles, you've got drive. Don't waste it screwing around with kids who don't care," he told me one day after class. "I don't screw around," I replied. "Dead serious." He chuckled. Good answer. The truth was, I didn't have the luxury. Other kids could flake out, get grounded, laugh it off. For me, every choice felt permanent. Slipping even once felt like proof for everyone who ever bet against me. By the time I was 16, the foster placements had changed twice, but my routine didn't ties. I still had my uniform, my squad, and my drills. Each new house, I kept my backpack packed, but each inspection, I stood straighter. I could feel the split inside me. One part still braced for abandonment, the other part growing roots in something bigger. When Daniels recommended me for a summer leadership camp at a nearby base, I jumped at it. The week was a blur of early mornings, long runs, push-ups in the dirt, and endless drills. My muscles screamed, my lungs burned, but I didn't quit. At the closing ceremony, when I marched across the field, I saw Daniels nod once from the stands. Just one nod, but it felt like a medal. That summer cemented it. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was preparing for a life where I didn't wait on anyone else to come back. Preparing to build a family out of uniforms and loyalty instead of blood. And if that family came with orders, discipline, and sacrifice, then good. Because those were things I could understand. When school started again, I filled out a form at the recruiter's office. I wasn't old enough to sign, but I wrote my name anyway. Emma Miles. It looked steady in black ink, like it belonged there. On the way home, I caught my reflection in a shop window. Hoodie over JROTC uniform, backpack slung high. For the first time, I thought the reflection looked like someone who could last, someone who wouldn't vanish, someone who could stand her ground even if no one stood with her. I walked faster, the paper folded in my pocket, the decision already shaping itself into fact. The recruiter's office smelled like coffee that had been burning on a hot plate too long. Posters of Marines in desert camo hung on the walls, their faces hard and serious. I stood in front of the desk while Staff Sergeant Moore looked over my paperwork. He was broad-shouldered, close-cropped hair, the kind of guy who didn't need to raise his voice to make you listen. "You're 17?" he asked. "Almost 18, I answered. "Birthday's in 3 months." He gave me a long look, like he was measuring more than my age. "Most kids your age are here because they don't know what else to do. You don't strike me as that type." "Why the Marines?" The answer came out before I thought about it. "Because it's the hardest. I don't want easy." He nodded once, like I'd passed a test. "We'll need parental consent if you want to start paperwork now. Otherwise, wait until your birthday." "Consent's not an option," I said flatly. "Birthday's fine." Moore didn't pry. He just slid a stack of brochures toward me. "Come back when you're ready to sign." That night, I spread the brochures out on my foster bed. Pictures of recruits in sand pits, covered in sweat and dirt, stared back at me. Words like honor, courage, commitment jumped off the page. I repeated them under my breath until they felt like mine. In the weeks leading up to my birthday, I doubled my workouts. Push-ups every morning, runs after school, drills until my arms shook. JROTC felt like warm-up compared to what I imagined boot camp would be. Daniels caught me one afternoon in the gym, my shirt soaked through, doing sit-ups until my stomach cramped. "You're pushing hard," he said. "I have to," I answered. He crouched down so we were eye level. "Listen, Miles, boot camp will break you down. That's the point. But if you go in already thinking you have nothing left to lose, you'll make it." I didn't answer. I just kept counting sit-ups. On my 18th birthday, I went back to Moore's office. I signed the papers with a pen that felt heavier than it should. He shook my hand, firm and solid. "Welcome to the Corps, Miles. You leave for Parris Island in 6 weeks." The words sank in like a stone hitting water. 6 weeks. That was all the time I had left of this life, before I stepped into something completely new. The day I told the foster family, they didn't react much. Mr. Lane just nodded, muttering something about steady paychecks and discipline. "Mrs." Lane gave me a half smile and said, "At least you'll have structure." They didn't ask why. They didn't hug me goodbye. But they didn't stand in the way either. That was enough. The send-off wasn't like the movies. No banners, no speeches, no tearful parents waving, just me on a bus heading south, duffel bag on my lap, heart thudding like it wanted out of my chest. I sat by the window, watching the scenery blur. Every mile felt like I was erasing Abby a little more, replacing her with the Marine I swore I'd become. Parris Island wasn't waiting with open arms. The moment we stepped off the bus, the drill instructors lit us up like we were enemy combatants. The air was full of shouts, commands, curses. Every mistake meant push-ups in the gravel, running until your lungs begged for mercy, stripping down and building back up. The first week was hell. Sleep came in scraps. My hands blistered from carrying rifles. My legs burned from endless marches, and my voice grew hoarse from shouting, "Yes, sir!" until it didn't sound like my voice anymore. Kids around me broke down crying, begging to go home, faking injuries. I didn't cry. I clenched my jaw until it ached, and I told myself, "You've already lived worse." I remembered nights on benches, mornings in strangers' kitchens, days wondering if food would come. Compared to that, a drill instructor screaming in my face was almost easy. At least here, the rules made sense. At least here, you knew why you hurt. Still, there were moments that tested me, like the gas chamber exercise, where the burning clawed down my throat and my lungs felt like they'd tear open. Or the obstacle course when I slipped on the rope and slammed hard against the wood, ribs aching with every breath. Quitting wasn't an option. Every time I wanted to collapse, I pictured Vanessa laughing as she walked away from me at that station. That memory burned hotter than any pain. By the third month, I'd built calluses on my hands, muscle across my shoulders, and a spine that felt like steel. I learned to strip and reassemble a rifle in under 2 minutes. I learned to trust the squad next to me, to move in step without thinking, to eat in 7 minutes flat and be ready for inspection. Graduation day hit like a shock. Standing in formation with the eagle, globe, and anchor pinned to my chest, I felt something I hadn't known in years, pride that didn't depend on anyone else. I wasn't the forgotten kid anymore. I wasn't the abandoned sister. I was a Marine. When they dismissed us, I didn't have family in the stands. No one to hug, no one to snap pictures, but I didn't feel empty. The other Marines clapped me on the back, grinning, sweaty, exhausted. We were family now, built not by blood but by sweat, dirt, and the promise that none of us would leave the other behind. That night, I sat on my bunk with the uniform folded neatly beside me. My hands traced the stitching on the sleeve. This wasn't luck. This wasn't charity. This was something I had earned, one blister and bruise at a time. And for the first time, the thought didn't scare me. It steadied me. Whatever came next, deployments, danger, loss, I wasn't facing it as the girl left behind at a station. I was facing it as Private Emma Miles, United States Marine. The heat in Afghanistan wasn't like anything I'd known back home. It wasn't just hot, it pressed on you, seeping into your bones, making even the air taste like sand. Our platoon's first patrol through Helmand Province felt like marching across a furnace with 80 pounds strapped to my back. Sweat ran down my face under the helmet, soaking my vest, but I didn't let it slow me. None of us did. Out there, hesitation could get you killed. Our squad's mission was routine, at least on paper. Patrol the village perimeter, make contact with locals, watch for insurgent activity. But routine in a combat zone meant one wrong step could turn the dirt beneath you into shrapnel. Every time my boot hit the ground, I wondered if it would be the one to set off an IED. The first firefight came quicker than I expected. We were crossing a dried-out riverbed when gunfire cracked from a ridge. The sound tore through the air, sharp and deafening. Instinct kicked in. I dropped behind a rock, rifle tight against my shoulder, heart pounding like it wanted out. Sergeant Alvarez shouted orders over the chaos, and we returned fire. The air filled with dust, smoke, and the sharp sting of cordite. I remember squeezing the trigger, my weapon rattling against my shoulder, not thinking about anything except the training drilled into me. Suppress, move, cover. The world shrank to the space in front of my sight. It didn't matter that my hands shook or that my lungs burned. It only mattered that the Marine to my left and right stayed alive. We pushed them back that day, but not without cost. Private Dixon, 19 years old and from Ohio, took a round to the chest. His vest stopped part of it, but not enough. I helped carry him to the medevac, my gloves slick with blood. He was gone before the bird even lifted off. That night, sitting in the outpost under a sky scattered with more stars than I'd ever seen, the weight of it hit me. Dixon had been joking about his mom's cooking that morning, and by sunset, he was a body bag on a helicopter. I thought about all the nights I spent in shelters, all the times I swore I'd never let myself get attached. Yet here I was, grieving someone I'd only known a few months. War didn't give you the luxury of walls. It smashed them down whether you liked it or not. The days blurred together after that. Patrols, ambushes, endless hours scanning rooftops and alleyways for threats. I stopped thinking about how many days I'd been there or how many were left. Survival meant focusing on the next step, the next breath, the next trigger pull. But war wasn't just firefights. It was boredom so thick it weighed heavier than the body armor. Long stretches of silence broken by sudden chaos. It was eating MREs that tasted like cardboard and sleeping on dirt floors with your rifle as your pillow. It was laughing at dumb jokes just to stay sane. One afternoon, our squad delivered supplies to a village school. The kids swarmed us, curious and fearless, tugging at our uniforms, asking for candy. For a brief moment, the war shrank. I found myself smiling, handing out water bottles, listening to them giggle. It almost felt normal until I caught sight of a man watching from the edge of the road, his eyes cold and calculating. The reminder was sharp. Kindness here lived side by side with danger. A month later, danger hit hard. We were clearing a compound when the blast went off. An IED buried in the floor tore through the front of the building. The sound was like the sky splitting open, my ears ringing, body thrown back against the wall. Dust choked the air, screams cut through the haze. Corporal Jameson didn't make it. He was only a few feet ahead of me when the explosion hit. 1 second he was giving hand signals, the next he was gone. My hands shook as I dragged another Marine out of the debris, my knees buckling under the weight, lungs burning from the smoke. Training said, "Move fast, keep fighting." My brain screamed, "Don't look back." That night, I couldn't close my eyes without seeing it again, the blast, the heat, the sudden emptiness where Jameson had been. I lay awake listening to the desert wind whip against the canvas walls, telling myself that if I could survive this, I could survive anything. War stripped everything down to raw edges. You learned what mattered and what didn't. Vanity, excuses, grudges, none of that had a place when your life depended on the Marine next to you. We weren't individuals anymore. We were a machine built out of flesh and willpower, and when one part broke, the whole thing felt it. On another patrol, I found myself crawling through dust, bullets snapping overhead, my mouth dry as sandpaper. My chest screamed for air, but my body kept moving. Alvarez's voice cut through the noise, sharp and unyielding. "Keep moving, Miles." I did, dragging myself forward until my elbows bled through the fabric. The fear was there, but it didn't own me anymore. I had turned it into fuel. Months passed like that. Fear, loss, adrenaline, exhaustion. Every day a gamble, every night a reminder that tomorrow wasn't promised. And yet, somehow, I held together. Stronger than I thought I could be. Harder than I wanted to be. When our tour ended, we boarded the plane home with fewer than we'd left. The empty seats spoke louder than any words. I sat with my helmet on my lap, staring at the floor, thinking about Dixon, Jameson, and the others. Their names etched themselves into me, permanent and heavy. But beneath the weight, there was something else. A certainty I'd never had before. I wasn't the girl abandoned at a train station anymore. I wasn't just surviving. I was standing here alive, after months of chaos that should have broken me. And even though the war left scars on my body, on my mind, on my heart, I knew one thing with absolute clarity. I'd never be the same, and I didn't want to be. I had faced fire, loss, and survival, and I was still standing. The first time my boots touched American soil after deployment, the air felt strange. Lighter, cleaner, almost fragile. The terminal was buzzing with families waving flags, kids holding handmade signs, wives and husbands crying into each other's shoulders. I stepped off the plane with the rest of my unit, helmet under my arm, but there was no one in the crowd waiting for me. I kept my face straight, let the noise wash over me, and moved forward with the line. It wasn't loneliness I felt. It was clarity. I knew better than to expect anyone waiting with balloons or hugs. My people were already with me, the Marines walking beside me, the ones who had lived through the same dirt, blood, and fire. That bond was unspoken, and it meant more than any parade could. Transitioning back wasn't simple, though. The quiet of home life felt almost too quiet. Sirens at night made my body tense. Fireworks sent me diving for cover before my brain caught up. I told myself it would fade. That muscle memory just needed time to adjust. In the meantime, I leaned into routine again. That was my anchor. I joined the National Guard not long after coming back. It kept me close to service, close to the uniform. Drill weekends gave me purpose, a chance to keep the discipline sharp without living in a war zone. The Guard wasn't the core, but it kept me tethered to the part of myself that had been forged overseas. At the same time, I enrolled in college. The GI Bill covered tuition, and walking into classrooms with a backpack instead of a rifle felt like stepping into an alternate universe. The other students worried about exams, internships, spring break trips. I worried about whether I could sit with my back to the door without breaking into a sweat. I kept my head down, answered when called on, and let them see me as just another student. That was easier than explaining the truth. Outside of classes and Guard weekends, I picked up shifts at a small bookstore downtown. The place smelled like old paper and coffee beans, a mix that oddly calmed me. My boss, Mr. Jacobs, was a retired teacher with a dry sense of humor. He didn't ask about my past, and I didn't offer. He cared about whether I showed up on time and kept the shelves neat. That suited me perfectly. The bookstore became my version of peace. Stocking shelves, sweeping floors, ringing up customers, it all felt simple, controllable. I'd learned enough in the Marines to know how much control mattered. Order wasn't just preference. It was survival. Still, there were nights when sleep refused to come. I'd sit at my tiny kitchen table, textbooks spread out, but my mind replayed firefights instead of formulas. The sound of Dixon's laugh, Jameson's hand signals, the moment they were gone, it was always there, just behind my eyelids. I didn't tell anyone. I figured carrying it was part of the job. As months passed, I started to notice something I hadn't before. Freedom in the small things. I could choose what to eat for dinner. I could decide to stay up late or sleep in. I wasn't waiting on orders, wasn't bracing for someone to leave me behind. The choices were mine. For the first time, my life felt like it belonged to me. Classes kept me busy. History, political science, a couple electives just to see what fit. I wasn't aiming for anything specific yet, but the act of learning, of using my brain for something other than survival, felt like reclaiming lost ground. At the bookstore, customers sometimes struck up conversations. One older woman noticed the Marine Corps pin on my backpack and said, "Thank you for your service." I nodded politely, but inside I thought, you don't know the half of it. Gratitude was nice, but it didn't touch the reality of blood in the sand or the weight of empty bunks. Weekends with the Guard gave me balance. Training exercises reminded me that I was still part of something bigger, still capable, still sharp. Wearing the uniform again grounded me in a way civilian life couldn't. I wasn't ready to let go of that identity, and maybe I never would be. Slowly, the pieces of a new life came together. Books on my shelves, class notes in neat binders, a paycheck that covered rent without guessing where the next meal would come from. It wasn't glamorous, but it was solid. And after years of chaos, solid felt like gold. One afternoon, I sat behind the register at the bookstore, flipping through a worn copy of Catch-22. The irony didn't escape me. A novel about war's absurdities in my hands, while my own memories felt sharper and heavier than any fiction. A customer walked up, dropping a stack of mystery novels on the counter, and for a moment, I realized how far I'd come. I wasn't hiding in a station. I wasn't marching through dust. I was here, steady, building something of my own. It wasn't perfect. The past never stayed buried. But every step forward was mine, and for the first time I didn't feel like a ghost walking through borrowed lives. That night, as I closed the bookstore and locked the front door, the streetlights flickered on. My reflection in the glass showed someone I recognized, but also someone I'd fought hard to become. Emma Miles, student, worker, Marine, survivor. The girl who once had nothing now had a path. Not an easy one, not a flawless one, but a path she had chosen. And as I walked down the quiet street toward my apartment, I felt something rare, a calm, so solid, it almost startled me. The envelope sat wedged between a utility bill and a coupon flyer, the kind of thing I might have tossed without a second glance. But the handwriting stopped me cold. Neat, slanted, too familiar. My chest tightened before I even read the return address. Vanessa Hayes. 10 years gone, and there it was in black ink, like she'd been hiding just down the street this whole time. I stood in the kitchen holding it, the paper shaking slightly in my hand. I didn't rip it open right away. Instead, I set it on the counter, made coffee I barely tasted, paced the length of the room like a caged animal. Part of me wanted to throw it straight into the trash, bury it under coffee grounds and broken eggshells. But another part, the same part that still replayed that day at the station in nightmares, needed to see what she had to say. When I finally tore it open, the letter inside smelled faintly of lavender. My sister always loved scented stationery, as if perfume could soften whatever words she wrote. The letter began simple. Emma, no nickname, no apology in the greeting, just my name. She wrote about finding my name online, how she'd been searching for years, how she had grown up since the day she left me. She said she regretted it, called it a mistake, made in a moment of poor judgment. A mistake. My jaw clenched so hard I thought my teeth would crack. You don't accidentally abandon your sister in a train station. You don't misplace blood like a set of car keys. She wrote that she missed me, that she thought of me every birthday, every holiday, every milestone, that she wanted to Reconnect. The word made my stomach turn. Like we were just old friends who'd lost touch, not siblings split by betrayal. I dropped the letter on the counter and stared at it, the words blurring. My pulse raced as anger shot through me, hotter than any desert sun I'd marched under. For years, I'd built my life from the ground up. No safety nets, no family cheering me on. Every accomplishment, every survival, had been mine alone. And now she wanted back in. Like it was that simple. I shoved the letter back into the envelope, slammed it into a drawer, and tried to forget it. But forgetting wasn't my strong suit. That night, I tossed in bed, staring at the ceiling, the letter's words crawling across my brain. Mistake, reconnect. My fists curled around the sheets. She had no idea what it took for me to survive. The next morning at the bookstore, I was sharper than usual, snapping at a customer who left books in the wrong aisle. Mr. Jacobs raised an eyebrow but didn't press. I wasn't about to explain that the ghost of my sister had shown up in my mailbox. Instead, I buried myself in shelving and ringing up sales, hoping the monotony would scrub her voice out of my head. But it followed me everywhere. In class, when the professor droned about foreign policy, I saw Vanessa's face instead of the lecture slides. At guard drill, as I cleaned my rifle, I thought about how she'd once promised never to let anyone hurt me, and then she became the first person who did. After a week of sleepless nights, I pulled the letter back out. I read it again, slower this time, searching for something real between the lines. All I found was vagueness. No details, no true acknowledgement of the damage. She wanted forgiveness without confession, closure without honesty. I thought about the girl she left behind at that station, hungry and terrified. I thought about Dixon and Jameson, who'd never get another chance to fix their mistakes. And then I thought about me, about the Marine I had become, the woman who built a life out of ashes. The more I thought, the clearer it became. This wasn't about her wanting to reconnect. This was about her easing her conscience, washing her hands of guilt she should carry for the rest of her life. Still, a part of me wrestled with it. Family is supposed to mean something, right? Even broken, even flawed. Was I heartless for refusing to hear her out? Was I cruel for slamming the door before she even knocked? I carried those questions into everything I did. Folding laundry, sitting in class, stacking novels by spine color. It all came with a background hum of doubt. The letter sat on my desk, a silent reminder I couldn't shake. One night after drill, Alvarez, now a civilian but still someone I trusted, called to check in. His voice cut through the fog like it always did. "You sound off, Miles. What's eating at you?" I hesitated, then told him. Not every detail, but enough. The sister, the letter, the words that wouldn't leave me alone. He didn't give me sympathy. He gave me bluntness. "You don't owe anyone a damn thing," he said. "Not family, not blood, not anyone who threw you away. You hear me? You don't owe her." I nodded into the silence, even though he couldn't see it. His words didn't erase the turmoil, but they anchored me. The letter stayed on the desk for days after that. Some mornings I'd glance at it with a flicker of temptation, thinking maybe I should write back, just once. Other mornings I wanted to burn it, watch the paper curl into ash. But I didn't do either. I left it there, gathering dust, because it reminded me of something important. The past doesn't get to rewrite itself. When I finally slid it into a folder with other old documents, my hands were steady. I knew where it belonged, not in my heart, not in my present, but locked away with the other records of things that once tried to define me. And as I zipped my bag the next morning for guard duty, I felt lighter. Not free, not entirely, but lighter, like a weight had shifted just enough to let me breathe. The ringtone jolted me awake at 2 a.m., sharp and shrill against the dark. My phone buzzed across the nightstand like it was trying to crawl away. I blinked at the screen, groggy, only to see the same name lighting up again and again. Vanessa Hayes. I froze. My chest tightened. For a second, I thought I was dreaming, but the call kept flashing, then cutting off, then flashing again. 37 missed calls stacked one after another, like she was pounding on the walls of my life. I let it ring until the screen went black. Lying there in the dark, I could hear my own pulse louder than the phone had been. She had my number now. That meant she'd dug deeper than a letter. That meant she wasn't going to stop. Sleep was gone. I sat up, pressed the heels of my palms into my eyes, and cursed under my breath. My mind started spinning through questions I didn't want. How did she find me? Why now? What made her think she had the right? By morning, the calls had stopped, but the pit in my stomach stayed. I dragged myself into class, pretending to take notes, though all I saw on the page was her name scrawled in messy loops. My phone sat face down on the desk, silent but heavy, like it was holding a secret I couldn't shake. At the bookstore later, I kept checking the front window, half expecting her face to appear. Every time the door chimed, my shoulders tensed. When Mr. Jacobs asked if I was okay, I muttered something about a rough night and went back to shelving. That evening, sitting on my couch, I scrolled through the missed calls. 37 attempts in one night. If desperation had a number, that was it. Against my better judgment, I opened the voicemail tab. There were 3 messages. My finger hovered, then pressed play. Her voice filled the room, older but unmistakable. "Emma, it's me. Please don't hang up. I know you don't want to hear from me, but I need to talk to you. It's important." The next message came fast, more frantic. "Emma, please, I'm begging you. I can explain. Just pick up. Please." The third was quieter, almost broken. "I'm sorry. I should have never left you that day. I don't expect forgiveness. I need you to know the truth." And I sat there staring at the phone long after the message ended. Truth, that word again. What truth could possibly matter now? 10 years of silence, 10 years of me clawing my way through hell to build something, and suddenly she wanted to unload a revelation? I set the phone down hard, grabbed my jacket, and walked until my legs ached. The city at night was noisy sirens, laughter, the occasional honk, but it didn't drown out the storm inside my head. When I finally collapsed back onto my bed, I knew I had to make a choice. Either keep letting her voice haunt me, or face it head on. Avoidance had gotten me this far, but avoidance wasn't peace. The next morning, I pulled my phone from the charger and stared at her number. My thumb hovered over block. It would be easy. One press, and she'd be gone again. But my gut twisted. I needed to hear what she thought she had to say, not for her, but for me. I didn't call her back. Not yet. Instead, I started carrying the weight of those voicemails like sand in my boots. At guard drill, I marched sharper, forcing myself into discipline, trying to outpace the noise. In class, I wrote essays with a fury that made professors raise their brows. At the bookstore, I stacked shelves so neatly it looked obsessive. But the phone stayed in my pocket, burning like a coal. One night, Alvarez called again. He could always tell when something was off. "You sound like you're grinding your teeth into dust, Miles," he said. I told him about the calls, about the voicemails, about her voice cracking on the word truth. He didn't hesitate. "She's pulling on your chain. Don't let her. You already know who you are, you don't need her validation." He was right, but still, I couldn't let go of the itch that maybe, just maybe, she was carrying something I didn't know. Something that might make the pieces line up, even if it didn't change the past. That night, I played the last voicemail again, over and over, listening to the way her voice broke. It wasn't forgiveness I felt, not even close. It was a cold curiosity, mixed with the anger I'd carried for a decade. The calls stopped after that night, but the silence felt heavier than the noise had. Like she was waiting, watching, giving me space to decide whether to open the door or slam it shut for good. And as I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the phone, I realized I wasn't afraid of her anymore. I was angry, sure. I was scarred, no doubt. But fear? That had burned out long ago. What I had now was choice, and that was more powerful than anything she could take from me. I finally called her on a Sunday morning. The phone felt heavy in my hand as it rang, each buzz dragging me deeper into something I swore I didn't want. When her voice answered, shaky and quiet, the years between us collapsed in an instant. "Emma?" she breathed, like she wasn't sure I was real. "It's me," I said flatly. My tone carried no warmth, no reunion glow, just ice. "You've got 5 minutes. Make it count." The silence that followed stretched too long, and I almost hung up. Then she blurted, "I'm sorry. I never meant for that day to be the end." "Never meant?" My voice cut sharp. "You left me at a train station like I was luggage you didn't want to carry. That was no accident. Her breath hitched. It wasn't supposed to go like that. God, I was young, I was stupid. I thought I was being clever, pulling a prank, proving I didn't have to babysit you every second. I walked away to scare you a little. But then, I kept walking. I felt my jaw lock. A prank. 10 years of abandonment boiled down to a joke gone too far. I told myself I'd circle back, she continued, voice breaking. But I didn't. I panicked. I was afraid Mom and Dad would find out I ditched you, so I lied. I said you'd run off. And then you never came home, and everything spun out of control. Her words cracked with guilt, but they only scraped my nerves raw. So you thought terrifying your little sister was funny, and when it backfired, you lied your way out of it. That's your truth? No, she said quickly. That's the start. After you disappeared, I tried to find you. I swear I did. I put up flyers, I checked bus stations, I begged the police to look harder, but they said kids run away all the time. They said you probably didn't want to be found, and Mom, she believed them. She said if you wanted to come back, you would. Her voice cracked again, this time jagged. I lived with that guilt every day. Every birthday, every Christmas, I pictured you out there, alone, and it ate me alive. I wrote letters I never sent. I searched online. I prayed Emma. I prayed for 10 years that I'd get this chance to tell you I was sorry. The kitchen around me blurred. My hand clenched the phone so tight my knuckles burned. A part of me wanted to believe her, wanted to take that explanation and let it be enough. But another part, the part forged in foster homes, in boot camp, in deserts where bullets snapped overhead, new apologies didn't rebuild burned bridges. You don't get to frame this as guilt eating you alive, I snapped. I was the one left on that bench with no plan, no food, no family. I was the one who had to claw my way into survival. You went home, you kept living. Don't tell me you suffered the same way. I know, she whispered. I didn't suffer like you, but I never stopped knowing it was my fault. I wanted to reach you sooner, but I didn't know how. And now I found you, and I just... Her voice cracked into sobs. The sound twisted my chest, but I refused to let it bend me. You don't get points for feeling bad, I said coldly. You can't erase 10 years with a letter and a few voicemails. I don't want to erase it, she pleaded. I just want a chance. To see you, to talk face to face, to tell you everything, not just on the phone. My grip loosened on the phone, but only slightly. Images of her face, older now, lines I couldn't picture yet, flickered in my head. The Vanessa I remembered had been sharp-tongued, smug, always ready with a cutting remark. Now her voice sounded stripped bare. You had a chance, I said quietly. You had 1,000 chances, and every single one, you chose silence. You chose your comfort over my survival. She sobbed harder, and for the first time in a decade, I didn't feel small listening to her. I felt strong. Strong enough to stand in my truth, the real truth, the one where I survived her betrayal, and I didn't owe her anything for it. Emma, she whispered between broken breaths. Please, just meet me once. If you still hate me after that, I'll leave you alone forever. But don't let this end with a phone call. I sat there, the silence thick between us, my heart pounding with rage, grief, and something dangerously close to pity. She was still my sister, even if she was the ghost of the one I used to know. I could have hung up right there, ended it clean. But some part of me, the Marine who faced fear head-on, the survivor who refused to flinch, wouldn't let me walk away without looking her in the eye. Finally, I said, you get one chance. One. And you better make it worth it. Her breath hitched again, but this time with relief. Thank you. Thank you, Emma. You won't regret it. I ended the call without answering. My hands shook as I set the phone down, but not from weakness. From resolve, because I knew I wasn't walking into forgiveness. I was walking into a reckoning. The little cafe on Maple Avenue smelled like burnt espresso and cinnamon rolls that had seen better days. I chose it deliberately neutral ground, public, somewhere that didn't carry echoes of childhood. I got there early, ordered black coffee I barely sipped, and sat by the window. My boots tapped against the tile floor, steady as a drumline. When she finally walked in, I almost didn't recognize her. Vanessa used to carry herself like the world owed her. Something chin high, shoulders back, a smirk waiting to pounce. The woman who stepped through that door looked smaller. Her hair was shorter, streaked with gray. Her eyes darted around until they landed on me, and then she froze. "Emma," she breathed, like she'd just found water in a desert. I didn't get up. I didn't smile. I just gestured at the chair across from me. "Sit." She slid into the seat, wringing her hands. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The clatter of cups and hiss of the espresso machine filled the silence. Finally, she whispered, "You look strong." "I am," I said flatly. Her eyes welled instantly. "I've pictured this moment for 10 years, 1,000 versions. None of them make up for what I did, but—" "Stop." My voice cut sharper than I intended. "Don't make speeches. Don't waste my time rehearsing guilt. I'm here for honesty, not theater." She flinched, but nodded. "Okay, honesty." I leaned back, arms crossed. "Why?" Her lips trembled. "Because I was selfish. Because I wanted to feel in control. Like I wasn't just the kid stuck babysitting. I thought leaving you there for a few minutes would prove a point. But when I walked away, it felt easier to keep walking. And then I panicked, and then I lied. And by the time I realized what I'd done, it was too late." Her words dropped like stones, but my face stayed cold. "Too late? You had 10 years. She looked down. "I was a coward. Every time I thought about reaching out, I imagined you spitting in my face. I imagined you telling me to burn in hell, so I convinced myself you were better off without me. But I never stopped looking. I never stopped praying I'd get this chance." End of B. Her voice cracked, tears spilling onto the table. "I hate myself for it, Emma. I hate the girl I was. And I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I can't live the rest of my life without at least telling you to your face, I am sorry." I stared at her. The cafe noise faded until it was just her words hanging in the air between us. Sorry. The same word I'd replayed in my head a million times, spoken in a million imagined tones. None of them ever healed the wound. "Do you know what that day did to me?" I asked quietly. "Do you know what it's like to sit on a bench until the lights go out and realize no one is coming back? To go through foster homes, to join the Marines because at least there abandonment had a uniform? To bury friends who were more family to me than you ever were?" She sobbed harder, covering her mouth with shaking hands. Heads turned at nearby tables, but I didn't care. "You want honesty?" I continued. "Here's honesty. I survived without you. I became stronger without you. I don't need you in my life, and I will never, ever forgive you." Her shoulders crumpled, but she didn't leave. She looked at me through tears, nodding slowly. "I understand, if that's what you need. If hating me is what keeps you whole, then I'll take it. I'll take every ounce of it." I shook my head. "You don't get it. I don't hate you anymore. Hate takes energy. What I feel now? Nothing. You don't matter enough to hate." That broke her more than yelling ever could. Her breath came in short, ragged gasps. "Please, please don't shut the door forever." But the truth was, I already had. The girl who once longed for her sister's return was gone. The woman sitting in that cafe had no use for ghosts. I finished my coffee, stood, and pulled a few bills from my pocket. I set them on the table without looking at her. "This is it, Vanessa. You had one chance. You wasted it." And so, her hand shot out, gripping my wrist. For a second, I saw the sister I used to know, the one who braided my hair before school, the one who promised to never let anyone hurt me. Then I yanked my arm free. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "I love you." I met her eyes, steady, unflinching. "That's your burden, not mine." And I walked out. The bell over the door jingled as I left, the sound almost cheerful, absurdly out of place. The cool air hit my face, sharp and clean, like a reset. My steps felt heavy at first, but with each block I put between me and that cafe, they grew lighter. By the time I reached the corner, the weight of her words had slid off my shoulders. What remained was clarity. I didn't need closure from her. I'd already closed that chapter the moment I built a life without her in it. The night after the cafe, I sat on the floor of my apartment with the letter she had sent weeks earlier, the one I'd stuffed in a drawer like it was radioactive. The paper was creased and soft from being folded and unfolded so many times. My hands hovered over it, torn between tossing it straight into the trash and opening it one last time. I read it again. The handwriting was shaky, uneven, but it was hers. She wrote about guilt, about regret, about how she prayed for forgiveness every night. She wrote about memories I hadn't thought of in years, bike rides around the block, sneaking Oreos at midnight, sitting under a blanket during thunderstorms. She tried to pull on the threads of childhood, like they could stitch together the gaping holes she left. By the time I finished, I felt nothing but exhaustion. 10 years of carrying the weight of her absence. 10 years of patching my life together with duct tape and discipline, and now she wanted to rewrite the story with ink on a page. I folded the letter carefully, almost gently, then slid it back into the envelope. Not because I wanted to keep it, but because I wanted the act of putting it away to be final. I dropped it in the bottom drawer, shut it hard, and knew I wouldn't open it again. The phone on my nightstand blinked with a new message. Vanessa had texted, "I'll give you space, but please don't shut me out forever." My thumb hovered over block. The part of me that used to cling to hope, the girl who waited on a train bench for someone to come back, hesitated. But the woman who had fought for her own survival, who had built something steady from rubble, pressed the button without shaking. The number vanished from my screen. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like reclaiming the steering wheel of my own life. The next morning, I laced up my boots and went for a run before drill. The air was sharp, the sky still dim. My lungs burned, but it was the good kind, the kind that reminded me I was alive, moving, in control. With every stride, the noise of Vanessa's voice faded. By the time I circled back to my block, all that remained was the steady rhythm of my heartbeat. At drill that weekend, Alvarez slapped my shoulder after a flawless rifle inspection. "Whatever's been eating you, Miles, looks like you chewed it up and spat it out." I smirked. "Something like that." The truth was, I hadn't just spat it out. I'd chosen to let it go. For years, I thought closure meant answers. I thought if she ever came back, if she ever explained herself, I'd finally feel whole. But closure wasn't about her. It was about me deciding the wound didn't get to define me anymore. After drill, a few of us grabbed food at a diner. Someone cracked a joke about family drama being worse than deployment, and I laughed harder than I expected. Not because it wasn't true, but because I knew I wasn't dragging mine into battle anymore. That part of my war was over. Back home, I cleaned my apartment like I was scrubbing away ghosts. The letter stayed locked in the drawer, the number stayed blocked, and the silence that followed wasn't heavy anymore, it was freedom. Late that night, I stood by the window, looking out at the city lights. For the first time in a long time, the reflection staring back didn't look like someone haunted. It looked like someone who had chosen herself, someone who had survived the worst abandonment a kid could face, and still built a life worth living. I whispered it out loud just to hear it. "I'm done." And I meant it. The choice wasn't dramatic. It wasn't cinematic. It was quiet, steady, and absolute. Vanessa could live the rest of her life however she wanted. Wallowing, regretting, praying. But I wasn't her mirror anymore. I wasn't carrying her guilt for her. I closed the curtains, turned off the lights, and slid into bed. My mind was still, my chest light. No part of me wondered if I'd done the right thing. Because for the first time, I wasn't surviving for anyone else's mistakes. I was living on my own terms. That was the real revenge. Not hatred, not payback, but peace. The armory smelled like gun oil and dust, the kind of scent that clings to your uniform long after you leave. I tightened the straps of my vest, looked around at the squad lined up beside me, and realized something I should have known all along: this was my family. Not the one I was born into, but the one I built through blood, sweat, and sacrifice. Sergeant Alvarez barked, "Move out," and we loaded into the trucks. The sun was just coming up, painting the horizon in harsh gold. My pulse was steady, my breath calm. These were the moments I lived for, the moments that demanded all of me, and gave me back a purpose bigger than anything Vanessa had ever taken away. We hit the training ground hard that morning, running drills that pushed us past exhaustion. Sweat poured down my back, my arms screamed with each push-up, but I never slowed. Every order shouted, every movement snapped into place, reminded me of the girl on that train bench who had been left behind and how far she'd come. During a break, one of the new recruits, Martinez, asked me straight out, "Corporal Miles, how do you stay so locked in all the time? Like nothing rattles you?" I looked at him and smirked. "You learn not to wait on anyone else to save you. You keep your head down, do the work, and earn every inch forward. That's the trick. He nodded like I'd handed him a secret. But the truth was, it wasn't a secret. It was survival, plain and simple. Later that day, I stood in formation as the commander handed out commendations. When my name was called, I stepped forward, boots striking the pavement sharp and solid. The metal pinned to my chest didn't feel like validation. It felt like proof. Proof that I had taken abandonment and turned it into discipline, betrayal, and turned it into strength. The applause from my squad echoed louder than any apology ever could. They weren't clapping out of guilt or pity. They were clapping because I had their back, because I earned my place, because I belonged. That night, we sat around a fire pit on base, eating bad chili out of plastic bowls and swapping stories. Alvarez told one about getting lost in the desert during a convoy. Martinez laughed until he nearly choked, and I sat there feeling something I hadn't felt in years: peace. I didn't need Vanessa's approval. I didn't need her guilt. I didn't need her love. I had forged my own path, carved out of discipline, resilience, and the loyalty of people who never once left me behind. When the laughter died down, Alvarez nudged me. You know, Miles, you've got the kind of backbone most people never grow. Whatever built that, it made you unbreakable. I thought of the train station, the long nights in foster homes, the sand and sweat of boot camp, the firefights that left scars no one could see. Then I nodded. Yeah, I guess it did. No. The fire crackled, sparks flying into the night sky, and for the first time, I didn't feel haunted. I felt grounded. My story wasn't about being left behind anymore, it was about moving forward, faster and stronger than anyone expected. And that was the revenge. Not bitterness, not rage, not clinging to the hope of an apology that could never fix what was broken. My revenge was living well, leading well, and proving that no one, not even my own sister, had the power to define me. The uniform on my back, the medal on my chest, the brothers and sisters beside me, this was my family. The only one I needed. When lights out rolled around, I lay on my bunk staring at the ceiling, my body aching but my mind steady. For years, I thought the hole Vanessa left would never close. But lying there, surrounded by the hum of soldiers breathing in unison, I realized it already had. The hole wasn't empty anymore. It was filled with discipline, with loyalty, with purpose. With people who showed up every single day, who had my back no matter what. And in that stillness, I smiled. Not because I won some battle against her, but because I had finally won one for myself. That was the revenge of success. Looking back now, I don't see myself as the girl abandoned at a train station. I see myself as the woman who refused to let that moment define her. The betrayal didn't destroy me, it pushed me to prove that my worth would never depend on someone else's choices. I found my family in the military, I found strength in every hardship, and I found peace in cutting ties with the past. My sister's absence carved a wound, but my life filled it with resilience and purpose. The real revenge wasn't anger or payback, it was building a future she could never take from me. And that's the story I carry, not of being left behind, but of moving forward, stronger than ever.